For almost 2 years, Canadians were told the next election was already written. Pierre Poilievre was hailed as the unstoppable force, the voice of the frustrated, the man who would ride a wave of anti-liberal anger straight into the Prime Minister's office. Pollsters said it. Commentators repeated it. Even many liberals quietly believed it. But in politics, nothing collapses faster than certainty. And on November 17th, a single set of numbers changed the country's entire political conversation. A new Angus Reid poll dropped like a political bomb. It revealed a gap so massive, so unexpected, and so humiliating for Poilievre that even conservative strategists privately admitted they didn't see this coming. The data showed something deeper than a bad week or a temporary dip. It showed a rejection, a turning point, a shift happening underneath his feet without anyone fully noticing. Tonight, we're breaking down the real reasons behind Pierre Poilievre's dramatic collapse. The demographics abandoning him, the internal fractures he can't control, the leadership crisis approaching fast, and the one political opponent quietly building a coalition unlike anything Canada has seen in decades. This is the story the conservative war room doesn't want you to hear. And once you understand it, the next election won't look the same ever again. The political world expected the Conservatives to walk into power, and not just win, but win big. For months, the story was that Justin Trudeau was finished, the Liberals were exhausted, and Pierre Poilievre had the wind at his back. But when the Angus Reid numbers came out, the shock wasn't that Poilievre was behind. It was how far he had fallen. A net approval of -26% is more than a bad number. It's a crisis. It means 60% of Canadians now see him unfavorably, and only 36% view him positively. To put this into context, leaders who win elections are usually somewhere between +10 and +25. Even deeply polarizing leaders stay above water with their own voters. But this wasn't a wobble. This wasn't the usual midterm dip. This was the political version of a free fall, the kind that happens when voters stop doubting you and start disliking you. The number that scared conservatives the most wasn't Poilievre's -26. It was Mark Carney's +13. That creates a 39-point gap, one of the largest between two major party leaders in modern Canadian polling. And the biggest question became, who exactly stopped believing in Poilievre? The answer was worse than anyone expected. But that wasn't the only shock, because the next demographic collapse was even more devastating. Women have always been the missing piece in conservative election math. Harper struggled with them, Scheer struggled with them, and O'Toole struggled with them. But Poilievre didn't just struggle, he hit historic lows. Among women overall, his favorability is just 28%. Among women aged 54 and older, a group that votes in enormous numbers, his numbers collapse even further. For years, strategists warned that if conservatives couldn't win women, they couldn't win the country. Women decide elections. Women set the tone. Women pay attention to tone, empathy, and stability. And Poilievre's political persona, sharp, confrontational, permanently combative, was never built for this audience. Pollsters have quietly said that women see Poilievre as too angry and too negative. His speeches sometimes sound like he's talking at people rather than to them. And when half the electorate feels pushed away, no message, not even the most aggressive, can fix it quickly. But here's the deeper problem. When women leave a political leader, they often don't return. It becomes an emotional decision, not just a political one. And this shift among women triggered another demographic collapse, one that shocked even seasoned analysts. Because young voters never warmed to him either, and their rejection was even sharper. Among Canadians aged 18 to 29, Poilievre's favorability sits at 26%. That means 3 out of 4 young voters view him negatively. And this generation isn't just another voting bloc. They're the generation that will live longest with the consequences of federal policy: housing, climate, debt, jobs, stability. There's been a persistent idea circulating online and in political circles that Poilievre's social media dominance would help him win young voters. His TikTok clips went viral. His jabs got retweeted. His speeches were clipped into bite-sized punches. But viral doesn't mean likable, and clicks don't equal votes. Young voters saw the volume, not the vision. They saw the attacks, not the ideas. They saw the anger, not the empathy. And when they compared the two leaders, the contrast became stark. Mark Carney may not be flashy, he may not be loud, but young Canadians often prefer calm competence over constant conflict. They've grown up in instability, pandemics, recessions, climate anxiety, political drama. They want predictability. They want seriousness. They want someone who feels grounded. And that's where the contrast exploded. Because while Poilievre's support was collapsing, Carney wasn't simply staying stable. He was building something far bigger. Political coalitions decide elections, and Carney's emerging coalition looks more like a wall than a tent. Check the numbers. 87% favorability among Liberal voters, expected. 61% among NDP voters. 52% among Bloc Québécois voters. More than half the supporters of other parties view him positively. That's almost unheard of for a Liberal leader. Carney isn't just holding his base, he's attracting voters from every direction. Meanwhile, Poilievre has 18% favorability among Liberals, even lower among NDP and Bloc supporters. His support exists almost entirely inside the Conservative base. Outside of it, he's seen as the political equivalent of a warning sign, loud, alarming, not to be trusted. This difference explains the 39-point favorability gap. It also explains why Poilievre needed his party to stay united. But that unity shattered publicly when one MP did something no one expected. He walked across the floor. And that moment exposed something far more dangerous: deep cracks inside the Conservative caucus. When Nova Scotia MP Chris D'Entremont announced he was leaving the Conservative caucus and joining the Liberals, the country gasped. This wasn't a random backbencher. This wasn't an opportunist. This was a respected Atlantic MP with roots in a region Poilievre desperately needed. But his explanation hit even harder. He described the Conservative Party under Poilievre as feeling like a frat house, not a serious government in waiting. He said negativity had become a defining feature of the party. He said Eastern moderates no longer felt welcome. He implied the party was dominated by a Western ideological faction that suffocated anyone who didn't fit the mold. And then came the line that caused panic behind closed doors. I would suggest there are others who feel the same way. That sentence set off alarms. Because if more MPs leave, Poilievre's leadership becomes unsustainable. Conservative MPs reacted with fury. One called him an idiot, another a coward. The party accused him of lying. These reactions didn't project strength, they projected insecurity. They validated his criticism. And they showed ordinary Canadians what the Conservative caucus looks like behind the scenes: divided, defensive, and angry. This defection didn't just embarrass Poilievre. It triggered something much more dangerous: a mandatory leadership review. Every Conservative leader faces a leadership review at the National Convention. Normally, these are formalities, easy victories. But this time, nothing is normal. By January, Poilievre will face a lost election he was predicted to win, a floor crossing that exposed internal dysfunction, poll numbers showing historic unfavorability, growing murmurs about MPs questioning his leadership, a base that loves him but a country that does not. Rumors, completely unverified but widely whispered, suggest there are Conservatives quietly debating whether Poilievre has become a liability rather than an asset. His refusal to soften his tone or broaden his appeal has left many wondering whether he's become too polarizing to lead the party into a winnable election. And yet, Poilievre continues to dismiss any criticism. When asked whether he's rethinking his style, he offered a firm no. That stubbornness is now his biggest political weakness, because energizing your base only gets you so far, and Poilievre has already hit the ceiling. Supporters often point to Poilievre's massive strength inside his own party. They note his 78% favorability among conservative voters, which is undeniably impressive. They argue that he still commands loyalty from the people who listen to him most, the party faithful, the donors, the volunteers, the activists. But here's the cold reality. He has already squeezed everything he can out of his base. It cannot grow any further. The ceiling has already been hit. The Conservatives reached 41% of the popular vote in April, their best performance in years, and it still wasn't enough to form government. In Canadian politics, base support isn't the path to power. Swing voters, moderates, suburban families, and cross-party floaters decide elections. And these voters aren't just drifting away from Poilievre, they're actively rejecting him. This is where the irony becomes painful for Conservatives. What makes Poilievre beloved by his base, his aggressiveness, his combative tone, his relentless attacks, is precisely what pushes away everyone else. These tactics fire up people already on his side, but they repel the people he needs to win over. When he dismisses institutions, strikes harsh tones in debates, or leans into negativity, his supporters cheer. But moderates see chaos. Families see instability. Voters craving calm see noise. And the numbers back that up. A Nanos poll showed Carney leading Poilievre 51% to 27% on the question of who would make the best prime minister. That is a staggering 24-point credibility gap. These numbers don't shift overnight. They represent something deeper, a trust gap that Poilievre's style simply can't overcome. And through all of this, Poilievre refuses to change course. That refusal is now becoming the defining trait that threatens to end his career. Political history is filled with leaders who believed they were right, until the moment the public decided they weren't. Michael Ignatieff learned that lesson the hard way, and now Poilievre appears to be repeating his mistakes. A leader convinced of his own righteousness, a leader unable to expand beyond his core supporters, a leader watching his numbers collapse while insisting nothing needs to change. Meanwhile, Mark Carney quietly represents everything Poilievre is not. His calm tone, his deliberate language, his technocratic background, his ability to command trust without theatrics. Canadians, during uncertain global times, are gravitating toward stability, not chaos, toward competence, not conflict. Poilievre still has time to recover. Politics moves fast. Narratives flip. Fortunes change. But he is running out of goodwill, out of fresh audiences, and out of second chances. If he survives the leadership review, he enters the next election as a weakened leader hoping the world falls apart just enough to make voters consider him again. But hoping for chaos is not a strategy. And right now, Canadians appear to have made up their minds. The Poilievre experiment hasn't just stalled, it's unraveling. And unless something dramatic changes, this may be the political moment historians point to. The moment when Pierre Poilievre's path to power quietly slipped away.